Welcome back to my channel as we are doing part 2 of the Underground Witches Coven. We are going to be looking at the Celestial Witch room today, the Artisan Witch, doing some work in the living space and in the kitchen as well. I have gone through hours of footage already, and it looks like I'm probably going to have to do a part 3 for this build as well, so stay tuned for that. So for the Celestial Witch, I really wanted this room to feel very whimsy goth. She's also a medium, so I wanted to tie in sort of the paranormal in here as well. I did have someone mention on TikTok that I should have made her room larger, considering she's the leader of the coven, and I think I probably should have done that because I really could have used the extra space here. But very similarly to the Techno Witch room, I wanted to have various platforms and different levels to this room. I do run into some issues with this that we will discuss later on in the video as well. Because she's a medium, I imagined her having a back room that would be disguised by a curtain that would be her little workspace. It would hold all of her tomes and all of her tools that she uses in her practice. My thought was that if this was an area that she would hold seances for the public, then she would need to have her own separate space as well. So I used this beautiful archway from Realm of Magic. And I wasn't really liking the way that some of these curtains were overlaying, so I grabbed this curtain from Realm of Magic and sized it down so that you can still see the beautiful stained glass in the corners. You can size down or up objects by using the left and right bracket keys on your keyboard. Luckily for this room, I was really able to use a lot of the items from the Paranormal Stuff pack and the Realm of Magic packs because they really fit in with the whimsy goth, kind of eclectic feel that I was going for. In this build, I really tried to make my life easier by creating witches that I knew I could associate with different packs. One of the issues I ran into was the artwork kept kicking out to the exterior walls, and so I kept having to replace them, which was fine because this gave me an opportunity to really nail down, no pun intended, the layout that I wanted to have for them. She's got a lot of different pieces of artwork. She's very worldly, and I really wanted to capture that in this room. And of course, just like in all of my other builds, I had the most difficult time picking the wall and floor swatches that I wanted for this room, so I went through a few different variations, but ultimately landed on this really gorgeous purple and blue, which really tie into her kind of celestial whimsy goth feel. So here you can see the issue that I was running into where basically there was a giant hole that was being cut out of the ceiling, which is technically the ground since we're underground. And I am still not totally sure what was causing this. I think it may have been the stairs that I was trying to include in the room, but I'm not totally sure. And the best solution that I found was to move the walls around until the hole was covered again. And then I'd just kind of have to go back through and redraw walls, redraw platforms. And that's also what was causing some of the furniture and artwork to kick out to the exterior as well. So needless to say, this was definitely a very frustrating and challenging room to work within. So I just ended up doing a single platform and using just a single step up onto the platform and completely getting rid of the stairs, and that seemed to fix the issue. Many people were asking about the ceiling, and this is actually a floor swatch from the Horse Ranch pack, and it's really cool because it has kind of the night sky with all of the constellations in them. Moving on to the main living space, I used some different pieces of furniture to combine them to create some custom looking pieces, which I think can add some definite character and give you some more options when you're building. It just takes a little bit of finessing to get the pieces to fit together and look like one giant piece. And here is where the really time-consuming part comes into play. I put so many small details into this build, and this is a really great example of that, with placing literally any magical item I could find on the shelves of their communal altar. We've got potions, we've got books, candles, different bottles of sorts, some oddities, basically anything I could find I threw on these shelves, which I was a little worried as I was doing it that it was going to be too much, but it really tied everything together. Then I also wanted to have their altar space have some different witchy elements on there as well. So we've got some herbs, some plants, sacred candles, a wand, and you can see that I had moved the table out of the way, and that was just so that I could get the items to place on the shelves correctly without trying to slot into the table slots. Which you can also do with tables as well. If you place an item on a table, then move the table out of the way, you can then freely place that item and it'll stay at the same height as the table that it was originally on. So you just get it to sit wherever you want it to, and then when you're finished placing everything, you can just move the table back and everything will be where you want it to be. I was also really excited to use these bookshelves from the Book Nook kit because they have little areas in them that you can put clutter, and so I ended up filling it with a lot of plants and kind of just different collections that they had, different rock specimens, different crystals, just again basically anything that I found that was either eclectic or witchy, I threw it in there. These bookcases do also have pre-made slots that your items will try to fit into, and they are a little bit more difficult to try and work around, so I kind of just gave in and just placed things where I thought they would fit, and if they didn't fit right in the slot, I would just find a different slot for it. Because when you're putting this much detail into something, you kind of have to just give in to the game sometimes. You can also see here that we have a V-shaped couch, and that is two separate couches that I just pushed together to look like one giant couch. I'm not really happy with a lot of the options that we have for couches in The Sims, so anytime I can try to DIY something, I definitely will. And it's pretty easy. You just use the Alt key when you're using the Sims 3 camera to freely place things, and then you just kind of tweak it so that it somewhat looks like one solid piece. I did not get much footage of the Artisan Witch's room because honestly I had a very difficult time decorating this one. Luckily, I was able to grab one of the pre-made rooms and grab items from it to help kind of aid in the design. Overall, that room was kind of out of my comfort zone, but I like the way it turned out. Moving on to the bathrooms, these are Jack and Jill type bathrooms, so there would be 2 witches to each bathroom. I wanted them to have their own sink and their own toilet, so I kind of did like a mirroring type effect where it's identical on both sides, just mirrored. This didn't really leave much room for a shower tub space, so I used one of the shower tub combos and just placed it in the middle of the room. I know it's a little odd, but I kind of figured that since this is kind of an older space, then maybe they had kind of done things differently back in the day. And maybe they had a tub in the middle of the room. Then just layering the mirrors so that they look like one giant mirror, and then adding some final small details to the room. My thought was that because these are shared bathrooms, they would be considered common spaces, and so they wouldn't have too much customization to them. So they're very simple. Each witch has their own space, but it's not cluttered with all of their different items. They definitely respect the common spaces and leave it very clean. The kitchen space was a little daunting to me in the beginning because I wasn't really sure how I was going to lay out the space because it's really a very large area to try and fill. I knew that I wanted to have a separate section for the cat items because I didn't really think that a litter box and a pet bowl would fit in with the aesthetic and the vibe that I was going for the rest of the Covenstead. So I started playing around with a few different ideas of having like maybe a separate pantry area. The cat would have his own little space here, and I actually end up adding on another tiny room that I end up putting all of the cat's furniture in as well. I'm not very good at doing like layouts and floor plans yet at this point, so I was trying to play around with some fun and funky ideas for the layout, which I end up just kind of scratching later. Especially when I'm high, I try to do something that I think in the moment is going to be really cool and funky, and then when I come back to it sober, I'm like, wait, what was that? And then the idea came to me to have their dining table kind of right in the middle of the kitchen. I did look at some inspiration photos on Pinterest, and kind of in like a witch's cottage, I would see a lot of instances where they would have their kitchen table kind of right in the mix of everything, and I thought that fit really well with this idea. So I wanted to add in a space that they could dry out their herbs. It would also act as a sort of workspace for them to prepare their herbs or do any sort of kitchen witchery. I also felt that upper cabinets would not be the vibe for this build, so I ended up going with open shelving, which I pretty much do on all of my builds because I think it just looks a lot cleaner. They're just not as bulky looking, and I really like being able to look at all of the clutter items on the shelves. This is actually to my detriment later, as I end up putting open shelving through the entire kitchen wall on this back wall and then have to fill it with things. So then I end up in the same situation again where I have to place so many items and it takes so long. But it's worth it because it's that attention to detail that I think makes my builds super cool. I really love using these nectar glasses as wine glasses on the open shelving, but same with these jars. If you place them, they will eventually go bad and then they will stink, and then your Sims will complain that they have dirty surroundings, which is very frustrating, and I definitely think we need just some empty wine glasses to throw on the shelves. And here is where I ran into that kind of funky layout, so I was trying to fix it by adding a little space for the trash can, and then I decided to build out the pantry. And I actually bought the Horse Ranch pack specifically for this room and for this purpose because I knew that I wanted to have some nectar bottles in there, and those nectar racks are just too perfect for it. Plus, I really wanted to have this skull that I could hang above the fireplace, so overall, Horse Ranch pack was a win in that sense. Now, I realized quickly that the bottles do not actually slot into the nectar wine racks on their own. I'm guessing it happens in gameplay if you have them make the nectar. I'm guessing they go in there, but I didn't want to go through all of that, so instead I decided to go through the very tedious process of rotating each bottle individually using the T.O.O.L mod, which was actually a good thing in the end because it gave me a lot of practice with the T.O.O.L mod, which I definitely needed. I also ended up walking through a kind of tutorial on the T.O.O.L mod during one of my live streams where I was able to help a viewer gain better knowledge on how to use the T.O.O.L mod, so I will probably post a tutorial video on that as well. But once I had gotten all of the bottles rotated the way that I wanted to, I was able to place them into the nectar racks to make it look like they were fully stocked up with their nectar. I'm not totally sure about the actual functionality of these bottles as they sit in the The nectar rack, I'm not sure if the Sims can actually grab a bottle from the nectar rack to drink from it, but I figured it just looked really nice, so someone will have to test that out in gameplay and let me know. Overall, I'd say this process took about 30 minutes just to do these bottles, to rotate them and place them how I wanted. So lots of work, but totally worth it. Because I wasn't totally sure about the functionality of those bottles, I decided to put a few on this barrel in the pantry because I was hoping that maybe they could actually utilize those ones in gameplay. Then just adding on some more open shelving. And from here, I was a little disappointed in not having too many pantry items, but there was enough to fill the space and make it look utilized. I used a lot of the dine out pack items and wanted to include some kitchenware items that you might find in like a butler's pantry. So there we have it. There is part 2 of the Underground Witches Coven. I will hopefully get part 3 up for you soon. And as always, if you are inspired by my builds and like to create your own builds, please feel free to tag me. I love to see what people can create based off of the ideas that I come up with, and so I really want to be included. Thank you all. I will see you soon.